Lavender Literary Society members, good evening and welcome to our third edition of Book Club and the closer for our inaugural spring season. Today we continue our voyage through the vivid landscapes of queer culture, guided by the vibrant pages of the books we'll spend time with over the course of the months ahead. As we gather in this virtual space, we are not merely readers but trailblazers, forging connections that transcend time and generations. Our mission is clear: to honor our history, celebrate our past, and pave the way for a future steeped in understanding and unity. Within the covers of our chosen books, we will discover more than stories. We will uncover the essence of resilience, the beauty of diversity, and the power of solidarity. With each turn of the page, we become architects of change, weaving our experiences into a tapestry of strength and pride. But this book club is more than just words on a page. It's a movement, a force for empowerment, and a testament to the indomitable spirit of the LGBTQ plus community. Together, we will traverse the rich terrain of queer history and memoir, guided by inspiring authors and iconic guest facilitators. So let us not only read, but immerse ourselves in the magic of storytelling as we journey through the narratives that define us, inspire us, and connect us. For in this space, our voices are heard, our stories are celebrated, and our collective spirit shines brightly. Welcome to the American LGBTQ plus book club, where every page turned is a step forward in our shared quest for understanding, empathy, pride, and queer liberation. My name is Suhaili Bautista Carolina, and I'm the Director of Public Programs and Partnerships at the American LGBTQ plus Museum, a new collaboration dedicated to preserving, researching, and sharing LGBTQ plus history and culture that will open its first galleries in New York City in 2027. I am a brown-skinned woman. I'm wearing red lipstick. I have gold earrings on and a high, curly, messy bun. I am wearing a plant print dress, and I'm sitting in front of a window with a plant behind me. We always like to say that you do not have to wait until 2027 to experience the queer magic of the American LGBTQ plus Museum. In fact, you're experiencing it right now. We are already producing dynamic programs and traveling exhibitions centered on LGBTQ plus history and culture, and I encourage you to check us out, follow us on social media, and become a founding member. Stay engaged as our story continues to unfold. Before we begin, I'd like to share our virtual land acknowledgement. While we are gathered in a virtual space today, we are each tuning in from our respective Indigenous lands. I myself am joining you from present-day New York City, the unceded homeland of the Lenape. We respect the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to the territories on which we reside and gather, and honor the energy and stewardship of these lands by all Indigenous generations, past, present, and future. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's author and discussant. Our author, Jafari S. Allen, is Professor of African American and African Diasporic Studies at Columbia University, where he is the Director of the Institute for Research in African American Studies and Editor-in-Chief of Souls, a critical journal of Black politics, culture, and society. Professor Allen is the author of There's a Disco Ball Between Us, A Theory of Black Gay Life, Duke Press 2022, which won the Society for Cultural Anthropology's Gregory Bateson Prize, and Venceremos, The Erotics of Black Self-Making in Cuba, also by Duke Press in 2012. He conceived and edited the GLQ special issue, Black Queer Diaspora, and has published scholarship in numerous journals and collections, including Unsettling Queer Anthropology, Foundations, Reorientations, and Departures, No Tea, No Shade, I gotta read that one, New Writings in Black Queer Studies. And we're also happy to welcome our host, Briona Simone Jones. Briona is Assistant Professor of English and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at the University of Connecticut. She's the editor of the multi-award-winning book, Mouths of Rain, an anthology of Black lesbian thought. Jones is currently a scholar in residence at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, working on her second book, Black Lesbian Aesthetics. Without further ado, I welcome Jafari and Briona to the virtual stage.
Thank you, Suhaili. My name is Briona Simone Jones. I am wearing a white collared shirt. I'm brown skinned. I have a low fade and I am wearing black glasses. Jafari.
Right. So I too am brown skin. I like to say the color of a Hershey bar.
Yeah.
And I have a white beard and uh, glasses with that are kind of rimless and a gold hoop with a cowrie shell on my right side. And we can talk about what the right side and left side used to mean, doesn't mean the same
Right.
thing anymore.
Right. I have cowrie shells on my right ankle, so we're here in gay. Um, so I want to begin with a backstory a little bit. I'm going to begin by calling you Professor Allen. Professor Allen, I first met you in 2017 as I prepared feverishly and earnestly for the anxiety-producing, perhaps most difficult genre of the graduate school sojourn, the comprehensive exams. Alphabetically, your name appeared first on my list of more than 200 some odd interlocutors, but by no coincidence, your brilliance, the Black gay habit of your mind still remains primary for me. Your capacious thinking affirmed my, at the time then, burgeoning work on Black lesbians. And your essay that appeared on my exam list, Black/queer/diaspora at the current conjecture, you rightfully named the salience of turning back towards the guidepost, towards the bread and the water that radical Black lesbian feminists left for us to glean sustenance from. In your latest drop, There Is a Disco Ball Between Us, A Theory of Black Gay Life, you further expound on the necessity of returning back to these thinkers, interlocutors, creative geniuses to rupture again how we have conceived the field of Black queer studies, the field of Black studies and Black futurity, its genealogies, its canon, naming very early on in your book the fissures and discord of movement building during what you have so brilliantly called the long 1980s, where you name how the HIV/AIDS epidemic created unique constraints around Black men's ability to conceive a more capacious futurity because their proximity to death was much too close. The aviation paradigm in chapter 10 on unfinished work was Chef's Kiss. Grace undergirds every single critique in your text, though. You not only teach me how to read differently, you teach me how to ground my love for this work in all of its contradictions with more empathy or grace, as you rightfully name it. I feel so honored to be in conversation with you this evening. The excitement that permeates my entire being is akin to the joy and wonder and shock that reverberated through me when I saw your name appear in the chat box of Karis Bookstore's live stream during the center of the global COVID pandemic crisis, where physical book tours transformed into cyberspaces, a time where Mouths of Rain, an anthology of Black lesbian thought, was beginning its first launch into the world in February 2021. You were among the first of 300 some odd viewers exclaiming how happy you were to witness my work on Black lesbians, to bear witness to the celebration of Black lesbians' intellectual lives. I was in complete awe. My body still remembers. What I am trying to articulate more clearly is that there is a disco ball between you and me, full of what you note as reflections and refractions. We exist in kaleidoscope time with one another. What a gift it is to say that. And so this evening, I am accepting the beautiful invitation that is marked by the last sentence of your beautiful body of work. You ask the dear reader in the concluding chapter, "Shall we dance?" as you say. Please, I'm eager to. So I want to begin with what you have declared the anthological generation, which you return to twice in the book, beginning in chapter 1, titled The Anthological Generation, and in chapter 7, archiving the anthological at the current conjuncture. Can you talk more about these stitches that have held you and me and us together, and how the Black gay anthology, or more specifically, the Black lesbian anthology, has shaped your life and your work in this book in particular?
Sure. Sure, I can do that. Thank you, Briona. This is so beautiful and generous. And I'm working on not appearing on every Zoom reduced to a puddle of tears, even though I can continue to be cogent while blubbering, but I shan't tonight. But thank you so much. That means everything.
Mm.
Um, I say in the book that I'm writing this, I wrote it for us.
Mhm.
And every time someone tells me, oh, I get that this is for us,
Mhm.
it is just immensely gratifying. And in a way that I don't think that academics usually expect or even look for, because many times we're writing to the literatures, right?
Mhm.
And in this way, and I'm clearly here writing writing into the literatures and trying to make space, and at the same time, wanting the dear reader, who I really believe is who dear to me, to take it up, to understand that it's for you, and thank you. Uh,
Mhm.
I remember how I felt being one of the people, and you're right, I was not going to be late for the Mouths of Rain Zoom. One, because I knew, because it's going to be a whole bunch of Black lesbians, that they would be prepared and be early. So
Mhm.
I too was going to be prepared.
Right.
Um, and I was just so excited when I heard about the work and when I finally got to read some of it. And even, I remember I got the courage to ask Cheryl Clark to read. I forgot the name of the poem, but it's the one on the turnpike.
Mhm.
Yes, the very erotic one. She was, but
Yeah.
I needed to hear her read that, and she did, and that was a fantastic night. So the anthological, for those who haven't read, is about the fact that those early anthologies, like this bridge called My Back, and all of those anthologies, were a way for the editor and for the press to collect voices. Everyone didn't have to have the same idea, everyone didn't have to be saying the same thing, but it was going to all be toward a particular project of knowing ourselves and being ourselves together, reading together, studying together, knowing that we're not that our analysis of our lives, of our own lives, is something that is valid, as opposed to feeling. And of course, in Kumbaya, they talked before about women feeling crazy, right?
Mhm.
Quote crazy, because they the way that they analyzed and felt was very different from what they were being told, right? The
Right.
the sort of gaslighting.
Mhm.
And so the anthological I think, is one of the most cogent sort of habits of mind, to bring people together, to not demand that everyone be in a party line, but
Mhm.
that we talk about and write about our experiences together. And I ask in earlier in the book that the reader, think about this book as a sort of anthology with a lot of different voices. Uh,
Mhm.
and then later on in the book, I think that um, the 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 shift to look at archiving
Mhm.
as a sort of anthological project um, came from my learning really what an archive is, from Stephen Fullwood, from Lisa C. Moore,
Mhm.
I was trained as an anthropologist, and so my work from in Venceremos was I was out in the streets,
Yeah.
day and night talking to people, and there's nothing for me, nothing that could compare to that, to talking to living subjects.
Mhm.
Uh, but Lisa's work in reissuing Brother to Brother and In the
Yeah.
Life,
Mhm.
and talking with her about her experiences, sort of remembering and putting together an anthology, made me really think how important it is to go back to those the works that are saved, and to also save some things before they're lost to everyone.
Right. Right. Mhm. So I want to talk, even though you say throughout the book that you're not a DJ. I want to talk about place. I want to talk about form a little bit, or grammar and citation style. So who you brought with you in this text, um, both those who exist in the ether and those of us who are still here. In terms of geography, you traversed Jamaica, which I thought was really poignant, considering that my father's family is from Jamaica. I thought that the conversation about the nuances of tourism was really smart. But you also traversed Trinidad and Tobago, Harlem, Atlanta, East Africa. In terms of method, you are the archaeologist, the archivist, the DJ, the ethnographer. And formulaically, you rely on the poetic and the archival, the interview, which I thought was beautifully placed and not weird at all, that there were interviews or even conversations sort of sprinkled throughout the text. Um, are all approaches that you contend with in the book. Would you say that Black gay theory necessitates this kind of transnational plurality and multifarious method or form?
I don't think everybody has to do it, but I think that to get at to answer the questions that I wanted to answer, and to do justice to the experience that I had doing the research, I had to do all of that.
Mm,
I do think, and I think that Ronaldo Walcott says in earlier chapter, when we're talking about the Black queer diaspora gathering,
mhm.
we were talking about methods, and he said that, when you set out to do this type of work, you're responsible for all of that,
Yeah. Mhm.
disciplinarily, right? You're responsible for learning how to do close readings, to do interviews, to be in the archives. You gotta figure it out. And this was an exercise in doing that. And I should say that, you know, I hesitate saying, or I say, not everyone has to do it this way, because, as I was finishing the book and had uh, some colleagues read it, and I was at University of Miami at the time. We did a workshop with graduate students, and one of my colleagues, she said very nice things about the book, and she said to the students, but don't bring me a dissertation like this. Right? That
Right.
we
Yeah.
want you,
Yeah.
like, show me that you know how to do the thing that we are training you to do.
Mhm.
Don't be trying to use language, which, as you said, like, use poetics to underscore the work, to shine a light on the theory. Don't use, your page breaks to try to theorize in another poetic way. It's all just too much. Uh,
Mhm.
and I was taken aback at first. And then as an editor and as a teacher, as I
Mhm.
um, see folks stretching, which is wonderful. Sometimes I think, yeah, don't try this at home, right? That
Yeah.
there is
Yeah. Yeah.
that this book took a lot. This book took a long time, and is um,
Mhm.
sort of condensed in a way, and the language is sometimes clear and to the point. Other times the language is not. Um, And I think that, let a thousand flowers bloom. I now love this. I love this book, and I love that it's not um, what I expected to write when I
Mm,
began. I think I say early on that the first iteration of this book was the book that was written to the Yale Social Science Committee,
hmm.
and it was so dry and corny. Nobody
Hmm.
had asked for it other
Yeah,
than them.
yeah.
Um, and I'm proud that what I came up with is something that you and others can see can see themselves in, and can see, a path toward your work by, undoing or arguing with or being in conversation with this work.
Hmm. And I think that's actually the beautiful thing about the book is that you are breaking disciplinary bounds. And I think that very smartly publishing with Duke also sort of buttresses the work that you're doing. I think that of the presses, they tend to be more open to the strange form of what we might call academic writing. So for me, it's actually a model on how to do the work that you feel may be called to do, rather
Mhm.
than the work that the academy sort of has bestowed upon us. But I imagine, though, considering that you already had tenure, that it was perhaps easier to dance and to to disco a little bit.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, it was. But the thing is that, well, yeah, that's another story altogether. When I
Yeah.
started writing it, I didn't, and because of the
Mm,
strange way that tenure works at Yale,
mm,
um, there is a pressure to write to that committee.
hmm.
And one of the reasons I left Yale was that I didn't want my life to be writing to that
Hmm.
committee, and then
Yeah.
writing the next book to that committee, and always feeling as if Elizabeth Alexander had this wonderful line that she used a couple of times about African American studies and Black scholars always arriving.
Hmm.
And after all of this time, after
Hmm.
all of the people who have come before us, after all the blood, sweat, and tears, in some corners, we are always just arriving. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
did not see that. I did not see that I did not see that for myself. Uh,
Hmm.
and this book is for me an independence, a declaration of independence in that way, that I
Yeah.
hope will make it easier for when, your first monograph comes out.
Hmm.
If it's strange, right, then we can say, well, look,
Right.
Jafari is strange too.
Already
So
in my book
gave him
proposal.
tenure. Could you please? Yes.
Yeah. No, no. I'm happy. Um, One of the things that I noticed, especially from the beginning of the text to where you're situated now, um, you came of age during the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And I wanted to talk about Jafari Sturgeon then and what it was like to write about desire now, in the throes of the pandemic.
That was,
How did you even manage to write about, you said the book is about desire, and I clearly feel how um it
yeah.
is about desire, but how did you manage?
I don't think I knew that it was about desire until it was almost done.
Mm,
And I'm sitting in a different place now, but I can imagine I'll be there on Monday in my study in Miami, sitting in that room for hours and hours on end, in a house that nobody other than my partner and I had been and would be in for years, literally. Um, was really it really focused. So one of the things is that coming of age during at that moment, I'd never had the feeling that sex was ever free,
mm,
completely.
mm,
That there was always in the back of my mind, in Tongues Untied, there's this chant, now we think as we fuck, now we think as we fuck, now we think as we
mhm,
fuck. And
Mm,
that when you know, when you come of age, and the first things you see when you start to, you know, look around to start your sexual life
mhm,
is that gay men are dying
mhm,
from sex, then you constantly think of that. And then
mm,
during especially the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, um, it was another very scary moment in which um, I understood myself and everyone I love to be endangered, and
mhm,
that I had to finish this book before, God forbid, something should happen. Uh,
mhm,
and also that the connection between what we call, you know, what I call in the book the ether and the present became thinner to me
yeah.
at that moment. That veil was pretty thin.
Mm,
Um, and you know, I could see, you know, on this side of my study, this row of books that is on my head level of all of the anthologies, and all the anthologies and poetry. I mean, I could see in my mind's eye, there's Alexis DeVoe, there's Marvin K. White, there's Cheryl
mhm,
Clark. So they're all here. And then my theory books, theory books on the other side. Um,
mm,
and so I felt I was in this sort of bubble
mm,
with the material and with them constantly, the living, and those who are on the other side. And it just drove, you know, that's the thing about the drive. It also drove my almost erotic, right, desire to
mhm,
to write, and to write in the way that was really connected
mm,
in that really scary moment in which, you know, the words in that room and the folks that I could connect to on Zoom was all, you know, other than my partner, that's all that we had, because we were hardcore. We didn't let no we never
mhm. Yeah,
visit.
you said you wouldn't let nobody in the house. Yeah. No, I hear you. You had mentioned tongues untied, so let's get into it.
Let's
Um,
get it.
in the third chapter titled Other Countries, your student asked, quote, "So, prof, what are we to make of the fact that Marlon Riggs, Melvin Dixon, and Asado Saint were all into white men, and Joseph Beam seems to not have had anyone? So from the purview of your anthropological spyglass, why is this the case? And has the field of Black queer studies been negatively marked by the fact and form of desire in this kind of hierarchical relationship?" So I'm thinking of Pat Parker's My Lover is a Woman, and then Asoto Saint's The Impossible Black Homosexual, or 50 Ways to Be One, as you cited.
Mhm. Oh, and I should have used Pat Parker too. Okay. Yeah.
No, it's a, please, it's my least favorite poem.
Yeah,
It's so much drill,
and
you
maybe
know?
because aesthetically it's not that maybe, because the other thing is that unlike you and other people, I wasn't trained as a literary theorist, so the work that I end up using to theorize is often you know, not what people think is like the important one, but the kind that really land for me. But that would be a good one. So yeah, this is a question. This is one of the other things that in that little room, and then, you know, talking to my partner, I would say, you know, when the book comes out, you know, you're gonna have to be my bodyguard because, you know, gonna get jumped at conferences.
Right.
And, you know, I said it jokingly, but also to express my sort of unease around um, having to bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I regret it at all. And so I would say that so bring what we're bringing up is the question of what Derek Scott calls what does he calls white dick in the black utopic bedroom,
Yes.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and what Robert Reed Farr writes about in his really brilliant essay Dinge, and Dwight McBride also writes about. But it occurred to me that the way that other folks had written about this or discussed it seemed to suggest that there was a certain, and Isaac Julian says it clearly when he calls interracial relationships transgressive, right? And
Mm-hmm.
suggests that black on black relationships are something other than transgressive, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That there's something perhaps sophisticated um, about that and unsophisticated about having a black lover.
Mm-hmm. Very, very
And
British of him. No.
well, and I try to, like, as an anthropologist, explain the cultural differences in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the proximity of
Mm-hmm.
people in the UK and here, uh, race being lived as class, also meaning that we are often segregated.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I wanted to, as you said earlier, say the quiet part out loud, and especially because I could not get Troy's question out of my mind,
Mm-hmm.
and my sort of gymnastics that I did in the moment to try to not come off as judgmental, or
Mm-hmm.
it was the most honest.
Neoliberal, love
Hmm?
is love, or neoliberal and the love is love.
Yes, and and love indeed is love,
Yes,
and we all ought to. Why would that be the one thing we can't talk about?
right.
And if we're going to talk about it, can we talk about perhaps black people in relationships with black people really being the most transgressive in an anti-black society? That, I
Yes,
think, is something that we ought to think about. Um, and you mentioned, very diplomatically, you mentioned Black queer studies, right? And the
right.
professorate that and it's not just us, but I think that even if you think of any realm of American society in which black people there are black people who are prominent or doing well, et cetera, that that you would have to think about who comes in the room with them,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
Say
And
say say more. Say more, Dr. Jones.
yeah, no, I mean, I'm happy that I think you say it quite clearly that whiteness has value, whether it's symbolic, material, and psychic. And I think akin to Black queer studies, if we were to look at some of the most prominent names in Black lesbian studies, most of them either have white lovers or white passing lovers. And so I think, I don't in the format of this, to me, operating as an archive of its own, I'm happy that we get a diverse sort of compilation of what it means to live a Black gay life. And I don't think that it's messy um, or reductive to examine our objects of desire and how proximity to power feels good for a lot of people.
Mhm,
Um, and so I was happy that you put it on the proverbial floor.
mhm.
Um, I know that we have 5 minutes, but
What?
I know one of the I'm going to try to converge my questions. I think uh Pat's voice appears almost in every chapter of this particular book, and I'm so happy that you love Pat in the way that I do. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, because this is also something that E. Patrick Johnson talks about in Aberrations in Black. Why do you think Black lesbian studies considers to remain um, tertiary or small or subsidiary? We can use any kind of adjective to describe the way in which it has not been institutionalized. I think we talked about this briefly when we were at Spelman for their Black Queer Studies conference. Why do you think that there's this particular chasm? And what is the work of, I guess, Black queer studies now? And should we be looking at their work more intentionally, especially at this juncture of the global landscape, the epidemic, the pandemic, et cetera?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, that's what the $64,000 question, right? But I think that maybe if we think of it um, another way, because it remains, that work remains important. The newer work that's coming out is in yours and other is remains in that tradition,
Mm-hmm.
and um and will be lasting,
Mm-hmm.
and will continue to build foundations. Now, the thing about big and sort of splash, etc., there may be cross purposes, right? Because the way that I read the aesthetic and the politics is constant or insistence on an embodied praxis and insistence on telling truths beautifully and or plainly,
Mm-hmm.
um, and also a real dedication to foremothers and to writing in a way that is either accessible, right, in quotes, or in an in an artful way that is still in that tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that is outside of the market currently,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if anyone watching, any graduate students or people who have a lot of time who want to do, an ethnography of black lesbians, please let me know, and we
Mm-hmm.
can
You
I
do the
will
work.
I will hold your hand as you do that work.
Right.
Um, but the person who wants to have a shiny career in academia
Mm-hmm.
will find a way to make that work somehow fit into or be prefaced by a dead French theorist
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or a continental philosopher
Yes.
and or a disaffected straight black man,
Yep.
because these are the realms in which, these are these had been the coins of the realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be big, if it wants to be big in that way, right,
Mm-hmm.
it would be that. And it'd be very interesting for me to read how that would work and still be in a particular intellectual tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, yeah, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that what happens uh, is that work in that main Black feminist studies continues to do what Black feminist studies has done, before there was technically feminism, and even before people started calling themselves Black, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and folks may catch up.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, we
May.
can
I'm
also
also,
find other ways to game the system.
I know. I mean, I think this is one exemplar. And I'm even seeing how Audrey and Cheryl and Pat as sort of a triad are becoming too big. And so I'm hoping that you mentioned Anita Cornwell in the book. I'm hoping that we don't
Mhm.
fall into the trap of choosing particular kinds of giants and really missing that these particular writers exist on a continuum,
Right.
and that we don't just have to choose three or cite the same three people.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I want to talk about which I rarely ever say or talk about dick, dick politics. Um, But I think it's smart. You cite that dick politics is a shorthand for how attractive, well-spoken, typically masculine, cisgender men are recruited, expected to, and often do take up disproportionate room in Black LGBT and queer spaces. Building on Essex poem Black Machismo. I wanted to talk about the chasms between Black gay men solidarity with or alongside Black women. You name the HIV/AIDS epidemic um, being something that was so critical or crucial for that particular generation. So much so that you all have not been able to sort of think beyond it. I'm also thinking about Black male studies, which we don't have to cite the thinkers within that particular,
Mhm.
I won't even call it a field. But within that particular movement, there's a way in which there's still some fraught relationship between how you all coexist together as masculine subjects that's different than how Black queer women or Black feminists are coalescing. So
Mhm.
what are the issues or pitfalls of these dick politics that still permeate our transgressive fields, and what does the future of our coalitional work look like to you?
Mm. This is the other thing that I thought I would be fighting about. But for whatever reason, the
It's
people
true
who might
though. As soon as you said
people
dick
who
politics, I thought about ASA or like like big dicks everywhere.
just the way
But
it is, right? Yeah. Um, and 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 one of the things I try to be honest about in the book is like my this is a rare time for you to talk about dick, right? But for me to confess being enamored of these certain
mhm,
forms of Black masculinity, but also wanting to and having to have a critical read of it, to understand it for myself, to not fall prey to it in my everyday practice as a teacher, as a person, as a friend, uh,
mhm,
as a family member. Uh, it's some of it is irresistible to people.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and there's little reward for those who could step into that to refuse it.
mhm,
And so the future will have to be more people who meet who meet the requirements for being recruited into sort of representational and leadership positions
mhm,
and speaker positions and head of household and head of whatever positions, to say, wait, wait, wait. Let's talk about who might actually be more appropriate for this role,
mhm,
and why is it that we feel that it has to be somebody like me. Those folks are
mhm,
going to have to be able to say that. um, and so, but your question was also around how that around the lack of the lack of something. What's preventing me from saying what I want to say is I keep hearing this church phrase of people being unevenly yoked, right? So,
mhm. Yes,
so like the
yes, great fit.
uneven
Yeah, I was
that
raised
that
Baptist, so yes, talk about
that
it.
Black men and Black women are unevenly yoked
Mhm.
politically. That
Yes.
is that women, whether they are queer, lesbian, or otherwise, are expected to do the intellectual work, and many
Mhm,
times also the physical work and the strategic work, and men are expected to represent and then stand up and be the person at the head. Also, there is an uneven yokeness in terms of solidarity, and the history seems clear. And Pat says this very uncharacteristically politely for Pat
Mm-hmm.
in that speech when she says, that Black women, we've been here and will continue to be here for Black men who are more vulnerable to HIV and AIDS. And where will you be?
Right.
Where will you be when it's time to talk about Black
Mm.
women's vulnerability to cancers and to violence?
Yeah.
The record shows that folks were there, yes, but not in the numbers, not with the intensity or the force that Black women have been there for Black men. And I think that this is one of our failures, right? When
Mm-hmm.
Cheryl writes, 40 years ago, failure to transform, a new failure to transform might be a masculine failure to transform.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very much so. Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
somebody in the chat ready gonna fight me? Okay, okay, no, no.
No,
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 okay, good. I haven't
no, catch your
seen.
back. No. Um, I love that you speak about the sonic so much throughout the book. And I wanted to ask you, what does it sound like at the end of the world? I think we're we're situated in it. The end is near, as the debate, the presidential debate is in an hour or so.
Hmm.
Um, what does it sound like?
It doesn't sound like their voices. I,
Mm,
it definitely does not sound like their voices. Um, and the end of the world, if by the end of the world we mean an end to the current regimes
hmm
that we're under, um, and the straining for something new, then it probably, I mean, to me, it probably sounds something like, now I can't remember the name of that song. Um, but a song from the 1970s with lots of cowbells and with
mm,
lots of people clapping in the background with
hmm
four on the floor. Um, I can't remember. It's all right,
mm,
but it's all right. Anyway, so that's what it sounds like. It sounds like a party, actually, because
mm,
what else are we to do, right? But
right.
to gather and to be in our bodies with each other and moving in some sort of concert, even frenzied. Sometimes, the days um, around here these days sometimes seem really frenzied. Uh,
Mm,
there's sounds of sirens everywhere. There's shouts, some shouts of distress, but I think I hear shouts of resistance and shouts of a new world even louder than I hear those cries. And that could just
mm,
be my orientation, but um, it sounds like those cowbells that are really that are uh, crystalline and still have a bottom to it. So if you sort of clang a crystal glass, it goes ding, and it has this sort of
mm,
real otherworldly thing. But a
mm,
cowbell, ding, ding, ding,
mm,
it has that register, but you still know that it's here, right? Um, and it is another form of drum. It's a percussion. So it sounds percussive. It sounds four on the floor. It sounds like the best disco house gospel that you've
mm,
ever heard.
mm. If we win, as you cite throughout the text, Audre Lorde's words. If we
And we
lose,
must win.
we must.
Yeah.
Although you said you're not the optimist. I like that the end of the world does sound more like triumph um, than sad tears. Lastly, before we go, I wanted to ask, how do you want your work to be taken up? How should people approach the book as perhaps curious people coming into their own sexual lives? Um, Although you say that you're not in literary studies, I think that your close readings were so cogent and so descriptive. But I'm in the humanities, and so I think that this particular text is something that I would teach in my courses. But how do you want the work to be taken up, either inside the ivory tower or outside of it? Who do you want There's a Disco Ball Between Us to be read with and alongside?
I I want to place, the introduction that you did earlier. I want to place that on the inside of the book, or on the back cover, because that's how I want it read. Yeah, I think that you got my intention. I want, I want everybody, right, to pick it up, and some people will get, some people like you, right, who have not only the academic training, but also familiarity with, with the folks that we're talking to and about here, and with the theoretical formations. You're going to get it in one way, right? Someone you know, who has academic training but doesn't know the other stuff, or maybe like an anthropologist, right, will get it in quite another way. I want everyone to get in where they fit in. Uh,
Mhm.
and if it's somebody, who is coming into themselves and is reading this not as an academic text, but something to remember and to get close to some of the living and dead folks who are talked about, start in the back. Uh,
Yeah,
One of the things that I really love about this book, the crazy, not crazy, but the really long footnotes.
me too. I was literally about to say notes on footnotes and the index, like brilliant.
And I have to thank, Ken Whitaker and Duke, because they usually do not allow this sort of carrying on. But I
Mhm.
think it was absolutely important. So that might be a place for people to go, because there's so many different conversations in there and pointing you to different people. And then the index, right?
Yeah.
To think about, what might I need to read? Where do I want to enter? And then to linger, a family member described this book as hard, right? Um, like hard to read. And, I get that some of the language the, it's not, it's not a pamphlet, right? And it's also not, uh, it's written in a way where the author is really wanting the language to evoke something, right? So it's not plain.
Hmm.
But I also think that if people just read slow,
Yeah.
that something will be transmitted that um, that they might be able to use,
Mm.
even if it is like, for example, right? So the four da, 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 so this thing about strikes and Margaret Thatcher and race articulations, right? So that can get into a whole thing, but then this discussion of the New Jewel movement, right?
Hmm.
If you don't know where you don't know where Grenada is, pull out a map,
Right.
right? And begin to imagine what it might have been like in 1979 on that little island.
Hmm.
And then imagine what Audrey might have thought in her visit there.
Mm.
It doesn't take a PhD or an MA or even a BA to do that, right? It takes patience and time. And I hope that, you
And
know,
care too, yeah.
care. Yeah.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, to me, it's like foreplay, like what the kind of time and intentionality and the various parts of the body that you have to activate to
Yeah.
engage in the foreplay of the moment. And so, yes, one might need to grab a dictionary. Yes, you might need to phone a friend. Yes, you might need to pick up a map. But I think that is actually the theory of Black gay life, is that it requires all hands or all bodies on deck.
Mm.
And so I think the slow read, the slowness of foreplay is actually good for the body and good as a reading practice, at least to me. But I think lesbians, we kind of have solid ground on why foreplay is salient, but I digress.
Huh. But that may also go back to the other thing about about lesbian studies and that tradition, right? That
Yeah,
it takes care. You're not gonna, you're not just gonna run up on my book with your nails like that.
right. You're not without brushing teeth. You just
Preparation, right? Okay.
okay, exactly. Um, before we go, is there anything I know I looked on YouTube and went through your conversations. I wanted to ask you, is there something that you wanted to be asked that you have not been asked before we go? Or is there a comment that you wanted to make that maybe perhaps you have not been able to make because of time or space? Or did I get it right, you know?
Yeah, you just got it right.
Did I get it?
You got no, you really got it right. And I did, I did and did not want people to ask about chapter 3 and about about the interracial relationship thing because it gets sticky. But it hasn't been asked specific. Oh yeah, it has, but that was um I had also wanted to to talk a bit about Black studies, right? And how this is also a vision for Black studies. Um,
Yes.
and um, and I think that what I've learned is that the conversation, right? The conversation is the conversation that we
Hmm.
pick it up where it is. And when other folks who are not in LGBTQ plus studies finally get to, the last part of the book, maybe we can talk about it, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but for now, I'm good. I could not be more grateful for the time and care and attention that you have brought to this, and that some other folks have brought to this. So, there's, what more could I want,
Hmm.
as a DJ, right? Than to
Hmm.
have folks, dancing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am so appreciative of your work. I think you continue to create vestibules for me to traverse and find my own work and create my own literary life. So thank you, and I'm happy we got to be together virtually.
Yes,
Um,
thank you.
I have a small announcement before we go. Um, to wrap up, the Lavender Society, or the Lavender Literary Society, will be taking a break over the summer and resuming in October for their fall season. But in the meantime, the American LGBTQ plus Museum will be sharing a summer reading list. Be sure to follow the museum across all platforms so you don't miss it. All right, so thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank
Jafari,
you.
love abound.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.